welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. My name is Dave McCormick, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Dion McCormick, no relation, who's our lead solutions engineer here at Alpha Software. Today I happen to know what Dion will be covering. I'm very excited, but I'm not going to tell you. I will not steal Dion's thunder, but it's been something that a lot of people have been asking for a little while, and I don't think you'll be disappointed, especially if you're working on mobile applications. So let's begin. Dion, I'm going to take you off mute here. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter.
Excellent. All right.
And there is your screen. It's coming through. So take it away.
Excellent. Awesome. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I've got a great demo and a little dog and pony show in background. It has to do with mobile disconnected login. It's very cool, and I'll dive into that in the next few minutes. But it's a little bit more on the techie deeper side, but we've gotten a lot of requests from people on how to do something like this, and our wonderful, talented developers have provided us the infrastructure to do it. So I want to give you a little bit of the feedback and a little of the background and show you how it works. That said, also I wanted to say thank you for joining us. We are here to answer your questions. In fact, this key requirement really came from multiple that I'm going to talk about today. It came from multiple sources that we got through our webinar, through working with projects with people, and through that we were able to generate the package it up, get it to our developers, and they added the capabilities to produce it. So your questions, your requests are critical to how we do our business. So take the time to go into the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel. Enter your questions there. Dave will be keeping his eagle eye on there. And with that, we'll get the questions queued up. We'll try to cover as many as we can today. As usual, if we're not able to, we will be more than glad to then follow up and get back to you with that. Along with that also, just to let you know, is that we always love to get our questions ahead of time. That allows us to prepare and be much more effective in the delivery instead of fumbling around for a while. And you can do that by sending it to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com. That's guides at alphasoftware.com. Send those emails in there. Again, Dave's keeping track of those, and we use those to guide our webinar and also to deliver to our development team and other people who are keeping an eye on what people need out in the field. So get those questions in right now. Real quick, the year continues to progress very quickly, and let's see, let's come on up here. What I want to talk about is we have our DevCon coming up later this year in up there. I don't know why I think, let me go out. I think my web, yeah, it's having a hard time today. So I was going to bring it up, but if you go to alphasoftware.com, and then once you're at alphasoftware.com, if you could go ahead and on there, there's a link for, am I not getting my connection here? This is annoying. There is a link on there to go find out more about our DevCon. And we have a lot of really cool training and sessions already planned where we're deep in getting all that stuff ready to go for you, because we want you to have the most incredible experience from a developer that you can have, both in terms of educating and understanding new capabilities, but also along with that is finding out more about what other people are doing it and what they're going from there. So let me see if it's down. You always make cool changes to the web page. So where's the dev? I think we can just go, I think it's slash
DevCon 2017.
There we go. So alphasoftware.com/DevCon 2017. Grab that, go there. It has all the information, shows the training that we're going to be performing. And again, we have this incredible set of people who will be there, both from the development organization, so you can ask those burning questions directly to those individuals. And along that, you can also meet other developers. And again, every year I find it super valuable because I create connections and understand what people can do. So when I'm doing my projects and building things, I know I have this complete roster of people who I can tap into. It's my ecosystem for developing fabulous apps. And it's going to be in beautiful Newport, Rhode Island. Very important, not Newport Beach, California, which would have been nice, but we're in Rhode Island. I just don't want you to go to the wrong coast there. But go ahead and check it out. And it has a list of the speakers, the training we're going to have. We actually have a contest in it. So take the time. I think you're going to be well served by both checking it out, but more importantly, by attending. We're going to have a great time, and it's going to be a very, very powerful event. Okay. So with that, let's talk Dun, 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 dun. Let me go the right way. Dun, dun, dun. Mobile login. Dun, dun, dun. I guess this is a little on the dark side here, but the idea is that when you have these apps out in the field, and I'm specifically talking about phone gap apps, standalone apps that are built to be out in the field, standalone, disconnected apps, how do you handle security? And Alpha has built-in deep levels of security there, but we kept coming across a common use case that we really didn't have like a simple answer for. And, you know, it kind of kept coming up, and we've realized, hey, that's got to be something that needs to be covered, and we delivered that, and the development team has done a fabulous job. And what is that? Is that it's a new and improved security structure enhancements that allow you to do application access securely while offline. So the use case is this. I have an app, I've logged in, I've got my data, and then I'm out in the field and I close that app or close it down. I don't necessarily want to force the person to re-log in every time they open that app. It's like, hey, they can, the phone is secure. Like I'm looking at my iPhone right here, and I have this amazing Touch ID, which is like what I love most about it. You just touch the little thing and boom, my phone cracks open and I'm good to go. Even the FBI can't get in there unless they cut off my finger or do what other thing or spend hundreds and hundreds of $1,000s to try and crack that security. And you know it's just going to get better and better. So I already have a level of security on the phone, so I don't want to have to necessarily force the person every time they access the app to log in, and especially after they've closed the app and reopened it. Well, previously that was kind of the model. It's like if you needed to get in and access it. Now the other part too, which is part of the issue that came around here, is that not only did I want to have a secure method that would allow them to access that app when they reopen it. So once they've logged in, it says, great, you're good. The app will continue running. Don't have to worry about it. But also on that, I wanted to be able to have the ability for them to do that offline, meaning that I didn't have to have a connection to the server to check their credentials and other pieces there. And I also wanted to have a flexible framework so that if I did want to change the behavior, like so after a month I wanted to force them to re-log into the app, or I wanted to use a PIN code that was another layer of security. It depends. I mean, some of your clients may have very strict security requirements. Means I want you, every time you access this app, you have to unlock it in some way, shape, or form. Just having the phone unlocked is not sufficient. So we wanted to have a structure that would allow you to kind of roll your own, kind of tune it to be the way that your client. So this, for my particular situation, I had a very good client who wanted to make sure that when someone logged in, they logged in and knew who they were. But then once they logged in once, they can continue using the app essentially forever on that phone. They could close the app, they could shut down the phone, they could do everything else and be able to run it. And so with that in mind, I'd like to go ahead and show you a demonstration of that real quick to show you kind of what I'm talking about. So bear with me while I put this up on the screen, and while I'm doing that, how's my sound and everything coming up? Is that coming up okay?
It's coming through.
Great, great, great. So I have, let me go ahead and go out of here. So I have an app that's on my this is an Android tablet right here. So I'm going to open up this app right now. This is the first time I'm opening up this app. So it immediately says, hey, you know what? No coming through. You have not been certified here. So I'm going to go ahead in here, and I'm going to go into my login, and I'm going to go in my and I'm going to log in. Now what's going to happen here is that I'm going to have to connect this. This is the first time I'm opening this app, so I'm going to have to connect to the server because we need to know if you're good to go or not. So I click login, calls back to the server. Good. Hey, I'm in. I've got it. I can start working with my app. I'm excited. Now watch what happens here. I'm going to go out. I'm going to close my app. So I've fully shut it down. Now I'm going to go back in. I'm going to launch it and watch what happens when I launch it. We go through the splash stage. You see the login screen for a second, but then it automatically takes me in the app. And I purposely show the login there just for confirmation, but there are ways you can go right into the app. But you'll notice there that I didn't have to re-enter my credentials. And in fact, I could take this offline, meaning I could disconnect my wireless connection and still achieve the thing because there's no communication between my mobile app and the back-end server in this scenario. The only time that occurs is when I'm ready to go in and do, say, a sync request or something along those lines. Now, I'm going to go ahead and click here, and I'm going to click Logout, And I've now said, hey, I'm logging out. So I'm logged out, but notice if I shut down my app, I go in here and I relaunch it, it forces me to log in. So once I'm logged out, I'm logged out. And in this case, I manually logged out when I wanted to do that from there. So that, and I'll talk in a little bit more, the actual developer can have a little bit more control. But now that I'm logged in, boom, I'm good. I never have to log in again. I can continue to use my app. I'm off to the races, and that's how it goes there. So it's a very simple demonstration, but there's a lot of stuff going on under it and a lot of flexibility on how we do that. So with that said, let me go ahead and get rid of this so we don't need to see it. Let's talk a little bit more. So how did this get accomplished? So first, in the traditional model, you have a login screen. It calls back to the Alpha app server. The app server checks the security framework, says, yeah, this person's good to go, and then sends a message back to the device, and they go from the initial login component or view panel to the rest of their content. But if I have to redo it, there's this key thing. There's a communication pattern, meaning that it has to call the server to tell the credentials. Now, that's A-OK, works great, but the downside is, let's say I don't have a server connection. What do I do? So let's go ahead and look in there. And this was I talked about this a little bit more. So now how this works, and it's very cool, is that you still have an initial login because there needs to be a way for this app to go to the server, know who you are if you've never opened it up, and also synchronize your data down locally so it brings down whatever data is appropriate to you as a user. So the initial login goes back. It performs the same technique that we did before, but it does one really cool thing. It creates what's called a JavaScript Web Token, JWT, which is an encrypted special file that is sent back to the device and is stored on the device in the file system. So again, very important. For this to work, you need PhoneGap. You can't do this really effectively through the web browser stuff. It's meant for apps that, just because if you're offline, by the way, you can't bring up your web browser and go to the server to get to the initial page, but it's all there. But the power is that inside here, we create this thing called a Java Web Token. And that is it Java or JSON? Maybe it's JSON Web Token. JWT is the shorthand. You may want to look that up. But the idea is this then has encrypted in it your information. So the beauty of it is now that it's on the local system here, I don't need to have a connection to it. So when I'm ready to log in, I can say, hey, I'm at the login screen. Do I have a token, and is that token valid? Because in there you can have like expiration dates and some other controls to say this token is only good for a month. So for instance, in this scenario, it looks and says, yeah, there's a JWT, there's a token there. Okay, open it up, look at the information. Is it okay? Great, then go ahead and take them into the app. So when I was doing the demonstration a few minutes ago, when I closed out the app and re-logged in, you notice that I went to the login screen, but then immediately jumped over into my app because it was grabbing this JWT and looking at it and saying, oh yeah, this guy's valid, it's not expired, we're good to go. Go ahead and just push him in there. You know, go ahead and set him up and push him in there. And then everything else works the same. Everything else works from the same. Now, the cool thing about this is you have a huge amount of flexibility. So your first flexibility is you don't have to log in every time and those pieces here. So where does the flexibility comes back? Well, a couple things. One, and if I go back to here first, one is that you may not want this person to have essentially an infinite amount of time on this app. It could be every couple months you want them to log in just to make sure that you have people logging in. There may be legal requirements when this has to occur. There may be corporate policy requirements that say that. So you can set that into here. You can set when this JWT expires, so you can look at it and say, oh, your token's expired. I'm going to force you to log in and get a new token there. But even more powerfully, and this is really cool, is you'll notice that when we first did this at this login screen, we created this JWT. Well, if I keep skipping it, I never kind of know that JWT. Well, Alpha does something very neat and very cool. It has a feature called onAJAXCallback, and it's built into it. So, and I'll show you a couple of the screens where this stuff is seen. The idea is every time a AJAX callback comes into the server, it's going to run that code. And what we can do, which is really cool in there, is we can pass along with the data, this JWT, The app server can decode it, look at it, and say, oh yeah, everything's good, and then send the call back later. So what this gives you the power to do is you can actually on the server invalidate that person or that user, and therefore when the AJAX called back, it looks at that JWT and says, the JWT is okay, but we have expired your access. And in this case it says, yeah, good, okay, you got a good JWT, everything's good. But in the case of here, what I can do is you can tell it, oh, no, I'm sorry. For whatever reason, you're now not able to access the system, and it sends a log back. So think of this as like a kill switch you can put in your app. Is you can say, hey, this person's not, they're not part of the company, or they don't have access to this app anymore. So on the server, you can put in the database that they're inactive, and then you can put in that onAJAXCallback to look at the JWT, invalidate it, and then you send a message back to the person saying, sorry, you're being logged out. Take them to the logout screen. And in that case, what it does is it destroys the JWT on there, and therefore they're back at square one. They can't access their data. They have to go through a whole login process. So this gives you a lot of flexibility, not only to make it easy for the person, but also maintain those states and situations where you may want to stop someone from being able to use the system, even though they had a good login like a month or two before, or whatever it be. So that's really, really powerful and very easy to do that. The other thing that's built into it, and this is something you would have to add, but there's hooks, and the hooks are the following, is that you can check the JWT, but you can also put in there to say, I still want to have a PIN code for this person. So you can actually add on top of this the concept of a PIN code. And what that means is that they open the app, it says, oh yeah, your security-wise, your access, we're using JWT, you can access the app, but you may have that second layer where you want to say, yeah, but you're going to have a PIN so that you can quickly, and the PINs are nice because you can go boom, boom, boom and get in. You don't have to type a username and password. So it's a good balance between high security and ease of use by the person. And so you can actually implement a screen like this. It says, step one, are they able to access the app? Yes. Step two, send them to the PIN code screen to allow them to then go to the next step. If that PIN code doesn't match up, then it stops them from going forward. If it does, they go right into the app. And this is another cool thing about this, you could use this too, is that you could create also ways of doing things like, for instance, you could send out apps and give people PIN codes so they don't even have to log in. They just put in a PIN code, and then we would set up the credentials, put it down, and then that app is activated and available from there. So the important thing is that you're able to kind of go in there and modify parts of it to tune it to exactly how you want it to work. So there's the basic operation of I log in, I can set an expiration date of when that JWT does, then they don't have to log in again until that expires or until you kind of invalidate it on the back end, or you can set up a PIN code scenario. Up to you. Really very flexible from there. And the real important thing is that if I have this JWT and either I expired or invalidated, you can lock them out, and then they have to go through a whole refresh. They have to be online. And remember, because we're doing this, there's no requirement to talk to the server. So this works really well. Like I'm out in a factory and I want to relaunch my app. Oh, I don't have Wi-Fi, I don't have cellular. Oh, actually, it's probably West Texas. I don't have cellular, I don't have anything. That person would be stuck. But with Alpha, we allow you to say, oh, no, that's okay. They can log in. They've logged in before. They have a valid JWT, and they can go ahead and access the app and do what they need to do. So it really opens up some especially for mobile disconnected apps, we got a lot of requests for this, and the team really did a great job of making it simple. Now, that in mind, you're like, oh, it sounds great, Dion. What do I do here? Well, our friends in development created a new, excuse me, let me go in here, go to my demonstration. What's nice is this is all pre-ready to go for you. So when I click new here, I click web component, and for people who are new, this is our alpha development system. These are all the different files that are in the system. I'm creating a new component, and that component is type of UX, which is it's a form versus a grid control. And we have included in here, where is it? Bear with me. There we are, right there. So we had our regular one, which is login component mobile app, which was a template that showed you how to put together that, put in your username and everything, call back to the server and get the results. In the last release, we now have what's called Security Framework Login Component Mobile App Persistent Login. So if I double click and create my UX with that template, you'll see that it's created my template. So we have our regular looking kind of controls. You have a login button here, and then you have a panel card which has the application, and also we have a logout button and the other pieces here. So this is a sample one. It's got a little documentation that talks about it. We also have a set of videos you can watch that walks you through this in much more detail. By the way, it is JSON Web Token, which is really powerful because it's a secure way to kind of store stuff on the local system. Really kind of handy stuff there. So the magic behind, just to do a quick walkthrough, is that normally if you look at a non-persistent one, this login does a little on login event and goes from there. But in this case, what we're doing is when you click login here, it's actually running an AJAX callback to a function. And that function is on the server. So it actually takes your username and password, sends it to the server. And the reason we do this is that on the server, we're going to do a couple things. First, we're going to see, okay, they've given me this username and password. Is it valid? Yes or no? Yes, go ahead. No, they're done. Shut them down. If it is valid, then we go through the steps of creating the Java Web Token, associating that and moving it back down to the system and allowing it to be available on the system and then letting the person into it. So there's an initial XB login that does that instead of the other method. Now similarly on logout, when we log out, again for a standalone with you would just do JavaScript, but in this case it does another AJAX callback to the logout function, and this logout function basically sets up the command to kill the JWT and get you completely clean and then send you to the login panel back from there. It's a much simpler script. But where you find those scripts is in the Xbasic Functions. You'll see there's XB login. Here's the documented code here. Don't be freaked out. It's all pretty standard stuff. And then down here is my logout, which I log out the user and then I do some things to delete basically what I'm doing is deleting my JWT and clearing it out so that there's no JWT on the mobile device. But that's it, these two pieces here. So very straightforward. Now there's one other thing that it does. So we have our login function and our login function out. But remember when I was talking about it that anytime you do what's called an AJAX callback, and that means whether you do it by code or, for instance, you use the sync function, because the sync function is basically like if you're syncing a list where you're going to bring down a new set of data, then what you do with the sync function is that you basically behind the scenes, we've already pre-coded a AJAX callback that calls back to the server, says I'm syncing, give me the data, yada yada, and do all the other thing it does, all the magic that occurs under the covers. So in here there is a server-side event called canAjaxCallback. And in here is some other code that basically grabs that information, sends back the JWT, and does all the things. And so what's happening in here is that every callback is going through this little function. And in this function, it's making sure this person's still logged in. Because that was another thing that was interesting. I want to talk about that, is that on the server, if you don't have that persistent connection, after time, it's going to log you out on the server. So I need to have a way to kind of relog you in and re-credential it so everything works. So behind the scenes is that in these functions, we're making sure you're good to go and you can log in, you're able to do that. And then we're checking out and see if you have an appropriate JWT token, and all the documentation talks about here. And if you don't have a token, then sorry, it sends it back and it sends you to there. If not, it goes as and parses it, it takes it, it logs you in, and all this is done automatically. So you really don't have to tweak this code. It's all in there, ready to go, and it'll work right out of the box, especially if you use this template that we talked about now. And there's also the ability to log information so you can see information what's going on there. So there's three parts of it. There is the login Xbasic function and the logout basic functions that are located here. And then the server-side on canAjaxCallback. And again, remember, this will be run every time that person goes. So if between this last time they did it and this time, you've invalidated that user or said, oh, they're not allowed to log in anymore, it's going to stop them from being able to do it. So it's sort of your guardian, the guard at the door, making sure the person can come in and communicating with them. So those are your three pieces there that are involved with that. And again, there's the documentation within the code and also there. You can modify this, and this is an important part of it, is that this is not all hard-coded. You can modify how this behavior works. You could, for instance, the PinCode capabilities. You could say, before they can even do the Xbasic callback, they have to go to the PinCode and do the PinCode page to make sure you're going in there. There are other methods you can do in here to say, look up some data before they're logged in or other things. So you have a lot of flexibility. And once you have a feel for how this works, and again, those videos walk you through the different pieces in the code and how it goes, and there's a lot of really good documentation in here, then the beauty of it is you're good to go. And therefore you can take your existing apps and now add what's called persistent login, where they can, as I demonstrated earlier, be able to log in and use things out in the world. So the way to get to that is you go New, Web Component, UX, and select, oops, let's go down here. There you go. Security Framework Login Component, Mobile App Persistent Login. And remember, when you click on here, you'll notice there's this little comments. If I double click on this, this talks a bit about it, but then more importantly, gives you the direct links into the tutorials that show you how it works, how it does it, what the code does. Really excellent documentation. And if you watch that, it's good too. And also there is a PDF too that has a little bit more background. So if you're more reading versus watching videos, you can download this PDF right here. And of course, Sarah's online with us. All of this information is available and will be expanded in our online software, our documentation. So remember, you can always go to Open Documentation. This will open up your web browser to our fabulous documentation site that gets better and better and better every day. Actually, you should check it out. There's a whole bunch of new formatting that makes it much easier to read code snippets and other pieces like that. The team's been very hard at work making this simpler. So it's a little slow loading up here. So that is what's called Mobile Persistent Login, is now a core feature in Alpha. By the way, I can go in here and let's see if I just type persistent, if I can spell. Is it A-N-T or N-T? No. This is probably not what I should have done, but there we go. Right there. All the information you'd ever need about it. Talks about it here. Has the other things, all the other different, this is talking about, and notice it says it's a pre-release feature. We are planning a new update very soon, because this is such, there's so many, these new features, people are really chomping on the bit to get it out into production.
Yeah,
so,
and by very,
yes, sir.
I believe it will be either tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. That's how soon the pre-release is going to come out.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I killed the surprise. Did I ruin this? Am I that
not at all. Not at all.
I can't wait to be at your surprise party tomorrow. Oh, I'm sorry. Wasn't supposed to say that.
I think anyone who shows up to our webinar should get the inside information
yes.
first. That has to be
You put in the time.
We're going to benefit to listen to us. Yeah, yeah.
We're going to give you new releases for everybody. The Oprah thing. Yeah. Not getting it? Too long. New releases for everybody. Okay. Anyway, that's what I have for there. So we have persistent login. Love it. I already have it implemented. It's rock solid. People love it because they get really tired of logging in. And especially for, as I said, like with the iPhone, you know, for iPhone people, they already have probably the best security system in the world as far as locking a device. There's no reason to put on too much extra on there to force them in there, depending on protocols and policies and things like that. And you'll really like it. And you'll see we're doing a lot more with the JWT technology. It's a very powerful technology. It's persistent, meaning you can store stuff in JWTs, and it can, you know, it can be on the phone for as long as we need to. And it's encrypted, and there's a whole bunch of other things that are really powerful about it. And so the team's adding more and more of those facilities and capabilities in there. So take a chance, go look it out. If you already have a mobile app, you can probably make your users super happy by having them only log in once and make their productivity go through the roof. And again, the client we implemented for this has been testing it. They're pleased to sponge, and it's, you know, now it's a non-issue. It's like, okay, let's move forward and work on really cool stuff. And it's amazing how like cool features just become like should be standard. And that is what you'll see after you use this for a while. With that, I'm going to turn it back to our fabulous coordinator. No,
MC?
showman, MC. I like MC. It's
there
like,
we go. MC.
yeah, our DJ.
So we do have questions, and they are in fact on security, which is also very good. So one person asks, hey, this is cool, but would this login security system work if you had a single device that was shared with multiple users? Like, let's say Jim gets off at the end of his shift and he passes it over to Gail, and she wants to log in. Can it be, could you design the app to do that?
Yes, you could enhance it, and that's the idea behind this, of that flexibility, that it's not like hard-coded. The idea is you would need to have the ability. So when you remember in my layout, I clicked Logout, and it actually literally called back the server, logged me off the server, killed my JWT. That was it. The only way back into that app was through the security system. But you could implement a soft logout, which would do the following. It would then, it would say, okay, disable you as a person, and then when you log back in, it would say, okay, you can access the app, but you could have like the PinCode thing I was talking about. You could go to a screen that says, okay, who are the current people who are logged in? So it's technically,
Right.
which is kind of cool, you could actually log in multiple people on the app and then kind of remember who they are, and then have a list of people, and then they do it. Usually you put in your badge ID, so you don't get that too crazy. I would probably, to make life simple, is that I would do the following. I would have one login for the app. If you're going to have 5 people, you don't have to have 5 passwords kind of scenario. But what then each person does is they set up their own personal PIN code. So you log in once. If there's no people in the list, and this can all be stored locally, you could say, okay, we have to create a PIN code for you. So put in your name and enter in your PIN code. So now that's stored locally. So now every time the app opens up, you could require the person to put in their PIN code. And then what you could do is then you could say, okay, if it's another person, they could say, no, I want to use the PIN code for my thing. So it would take some coding, but you could set that up. The nice thing is under the covers, you could have one login back to your back-end system, but still be able to, since you know who the person is, like when they create a new record, is put their user ID or pieces in there. So there's a couple ways to handle it. You can either force every person to log in and then have some kind of structure that allows them to select who they are, and then there's extra PIN code, because you don't want John to say, oh, I'm logging in as Bill and it's going to do it for him kind of scenario. But that's where this comes into. And the way you would structure that is that you could tell it that, you know, go to the PIN code screen, so that it forces them to come in. And when you put in the PIN code, you may have already associated that with the user, so you know who the person is, and then they could use the app as center. But you're right, that's a very interesting. We actually had that where you have factory floor with one iPad or Android tablet, and when each person came in on the shift, they're doing the same task, so they don't have individual ones. So they wanted to be able to say, okay, log out, but then hand it to the new person and log in. In this case, you could do that without having to go back to the server to do all those pieces there. So really good point. That's a cool capability.
Great. A very quick question. Do you have to be connected to log out?
Actually, no, you don't. The basic function is when you're connected, because it's going to go back to the server and it's going to do 2 things. Actually, let me open up the code and I'll show you right here. That's a very good question. So if I go to the logout, first it does a, now this is the Xbasic function that's happening on the other side. So what's going on is that it's logging it out on the server, and then it's sending a message back to delete the JWT. Well, there's no reason why you couldn't take this client-side code and put it on a client-side event, so that it just kills the JWT, takes you to the login screen, and then when someone opens up and closes it up, it says, oh, JWT is not there, so that it forces them to log in there. So you are not required it. The issue is that you want to make sure they're logged out on the server, but it will time out over a time period, so I guess that's, you know, not required. So you're not required to go to make this work, because you can just kill that JWT, and once that JWT is killed, when you log in, if that JWT is not there, then you can say, sorry, you have to log in, and that's one way to do it. Great question.
Someone here has a further concerned about security in that the JWT is itself a file.
Yes.
Would it be possible or easy or reasonable for that file to be copied from one phone to another phone?
The answer is yes, if you have the right tools. It's stored in local file storage. And you know, if you got someone super sophisticated, yes. Now, here's an important thing you can do. Is if you want to take this to the next level, you could record, there's usually, you can kind of get a unique signature for that local phone and then have your own phone gap code that says, okay, this is the JWT associated with this phone, and store that information. So if someone just put it on the other one, it would pick up that JWT. But you know, so that's a little bit more advanced, but you can definitely do that because there's a lot of really nice little scripts you can get to kind of do, you know, phone validation. So technically someone could probably crack a phone more on Android than on iOS, and grab that JWT and move it to a different phone. They would have to be a very sophisticated person. It's not like you can open up the file system and copy and paste kind of scenario. But there's no reason why you couldn't add an extra layer of security that somehow relates that JWT. So when it's created, see what's going on is that in the, just to let kind of so you can have, in the on XB login, this is when it's doing the Xbasic login in here. You're going to see in here that here we are. We're generating this JWT. So it's actually generating it right there. And what you can do is when you generate that JWT, you can pass it other parameters. So you're just not limited to saying it's username and password. You could also say unique machine ID. So on the server, you would give it whatever that unique phone identifier is. It goes to the server. It's going to generate that Java Web Token, which is just some Java JSON that's been there, sends it back. So now on your local device, you would have username, password, and device ID. Then when you wrote the code to say, oh, is in the Xbasic callback, you would say, pass along to the server the username, password, the JWT, and then also, or pass the JWT, but also the machine ID. And therefore then it would say, oh, wait a minute, they're out of sync. I can't let you in. So if someone moved it to another machine and that didn't sync up. So that's one way you could accomplish that kind of scenario and get to a much more hardcore link that just to one machine. So as you can see, we've given you the code so you can just go in and modify the code to your heart's desire to add more information. Because again, that JWT is kind of nice. Think of it as like almost a fancy cookie. You know, you have cookie files where you could put a whole bunch of information in there, and then that JWT is available in all of your JavaScript to then get information out of. So it's just like a little small file that's on the system.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Follow-up question. Is it possible to use JWT tokens from another service like OAuth or Google?
Oh, yeah. These are just, absolutely. The trick is JWT, if they're encrypted, you need to have encrypted strings, but absolutely. JWT is an industry standard, so we just have an industry standard set of functions that will encrypt, decrypt, read JWT. And so absolutely you could use it. And that's kind of, by the way, you know, spill the beans, you know, we're working more and more to make it easy, since a lot of what we're working on right now, and this I don't think is a big surprise, is making your life easier when you want to access web services. So, you know, when you're going to another feed, and more JWT is becoming a very popular methodology in order to, for security, like OAuth and the other pieces there. So this is kind of a little bit of an outgrowth of our work on how do you make it easy to create ways to consume and publish web services within Alpha, and JWT is part of that. So we added the JWT functionality to the system so we could make that simpler, and it was like, oh wait, we could use the JWT for our own security structure, and added it from there. So long-winded, but the answer is yes, absolutely. You can use the industry, you know, JWT to do all of those kind of pieces there. Really cool, and I think, you know, it's once you kind of get your hands around it, it's just a file with some information in it that's available for you to read, and it can be encrypted and decrypted, so that's kind of nice, so that you know, you can secure the data in there. So even if they got it, they couldn't decompile it and see what's the person's username and password. That's one of the key things about it. Is that encryption.
That was actually one of the questions that came. In fact, you answered two of the questions that came up. One was, can you insert information about the device into the JWT? Yes. And the answer is yes. And also, is the JWT encrypted or is it in plain text?
It's you can do either. You can actually have them in plain text, or you can encrypt them, and they're very strong encryption. I think it's probably as good as you can get out there right now in the mobile world. But yes, you can.
Neat. Another question is, will this work with IIS and Active Directory for that matter?
Yes, yeah, we're going to use the same methodologies here because we're just layering this on top of our existing security structure. So you will find that you're going to be good to go in terms of how you do that.
Neat. And so, given that you could pick up the device's ID, it might be possible to also log in the database what device someone was using when they were entering data on a particular
app. Oh yeah, that's kind of interesting, is that yes, absolutely. And the way I usually do that is that if I've got like a form and I have a hidden field and I throw in there like the Latin lawn or the back when the update date is, so you could easily throw it in there and then it just syncs back into the data tables. That's like the simple child's play. But there's no reason why, because you're trapping, and this is the important thing, every time you do a AJAX callback, you're trapping it. So you could literally put in, and we have this thing called log messages here. It was just to kind of see what's going on. But you could actually trap every callback from every device out there and create like a log file. So you could sit there and literally build up a profile of how many times devices out in the field are hitting the server, which could be used for resource planning, capacity planning, and other things like that. And this is a standard. This has been in there for some time. Like can it, and then after the callback's completed, you could do those things there. So yes, absolutely, you could do it simply through just a part of the form or part of the detail view, or even more sophisticated here. Essentially, you can do anything you want. And here, great question. This is so cool. This is neat. And this is really geeky, but okay, so not all AJAX callbacks are the same. Specifically that, let's say you had an Xbasic callback that ran a function, one that did a sync. Each one's going to have its own profile. So what's kind of cool about this, and this is already in here, let's see, where is it? User, you can, and where was that? That was so cool. You can actually determine what kind of callback is being made. Here we go. Okay, this is so cool. This is so cool. Okay, it's generic, but you can, in here, you can get the name of the callback. So remember, when the person clicks, say, the login button, okay, and it makes a callback, it's calling this function. So think of that as a signature. It's saying, I'm calling back the server, and all I want to do is do XB login there, kind of thing there. Okay, so same thing when I do the logout, is I do an Xbasic callback, and in that case, I'm calling this signature. Well, in this here, this is the name of that function. So I can actually say, if it's this type of function, run some code. So in this case, it's looking and saying, hey, is it either the XB or the login? If that, then I do something here. If not, then what I do, I can have it. And what's great is there's this thing called eAuthorize that you can literally say, you know what? This person can make a callback, but they can't make this one callback. And this is really arcane in much detail. But let's say you had a very super secret function that like looked up salaries or did something like that. You could say only with certain credentials can you go back and do that callback. So when this runs, you can actually find out what the callback is, and you can either let it go or you can shut it down. It's up to you. So you have a lot of fine-tuned control over the communication between the mobile platform and there. So that's really cool because it allows you a lot of control over, sort of, you can think about it, it's like, with our security system, we can lock down a whole component, or we can lock down specific fields on a UX component. Same kind of thing here is you could have all these different callbacks, and you could even look at the callbacks, and depending on which ones, you can say only certain credentials can do these certain callbacks to give you an extra level of security. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, cool. Very cool.
Yeah. That was
And
me.
is callback function name a new addition to Alpha Anywhere, or is it?
The what? I'm sorry.
Is that a new addition?
Oh no, this canAjaxCallback's been around.
No, not the canAjax, but the idea of being able to grab the functions, the name of the callback.
You know what? I don't know. I think it's been around for a while, but I do know that there were a couple of enhancements made to the server to make this code much, much simpler. That when the developers went into it, they said, oh, I need to be able to do this, this, this. So you do need the more recent pre-release for this to work. And if your pre-release has that template in it, then you know you're good to go. But I'm not sure if that's one of them. It might have been, kind of, to get that information.
Cool. Well, stepping back for a moment, we have some more basic types of questions that aren't related directly to login. This person has been using Alpha Anywhere for a little while, but they're sort of struggling with the concepts behind the syntax to get data from a form, manipulate it, and store it back into a SQL table. And they were wondering, are there any good resources that you could point to that would show people how to basically store stuff in SQL in a form? Where would you point them in? What sort of direction would you point them in?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I would go to...
So I guess they do have sort of a follow-up. This might make it more clear. Is mainly they want to know the correct technique that'll take data from non-bound fields and put them into bound fields so that they could be saved.
Oh, okay. Well, I can just show you real quick on how... Let's see. So they're non-bound fields, so you want other fields to populate those bound fields. So you'll use the standard techniques to bind your UX control to the underlying database. And in that, if you're looking into that, there's on our resources under the video library, there's some great videos that show you how to create bound UXs from there. When it comes to how you add information from an unbound to a bound field, let me go ahead and open up a new UX here. Come on. It's probably because I got all these open here.
I suspect what they're trying to do is have someone enter something into a non-bound field, maybe perform some sort of operation on that automatically, and then take it and put it into a bound field. Yeah. Okay,
the easiest way to do that is that, so let's go ahead and do this. Okay, so I'm going to create 3 text boxes. Unbound 1, unbound 2, bound 1. So I have 2 unbound fields and 1 bound field. So the idea is these 2 are needed to create this here. Now, the easiest and most effective way to do that is that for every field, Alpha has what's called the calculated field expression. And the calculated field expression, very important, is that it's client-side, meaning that you don't, this isn't done on the server, this is done on, and the neat thing is it's done immediately. So let's take a look. Let's say I wanted to put in 2 numbers and then have a third number, like, a multiplication go into bound 1. So I'm going to go to bound 1 here, and I'm going to go to calculated field expression. And I'm going to click the 3 ellipses right here. Okay? So now I have basically where I can create a formula in here. So I'm going to insert the field, unbound 1, times, oops, wait, circular, did I go the wrong one here? Let me see. Let's go ahead and calculate it. Okay, insert field, unbound 1, there we go, unbound 2. That's it. So I'm saying take the value of unbound 1, multiply it by the value of unbound 2. Now, you could use any JavaScript function in here. You could actually call a function. You could do date calculations, formatting, all this. It's very, very powerful. And the syntax rules will tell you all the different things. Like you can do trimming, you can do if-then. So you can get very sophisticated using client-side. Now, the great thing about it, as I like about the client-side, is that now, when I'm in here, I go 1 times 2, 4 times 2 times 3. You notice it's instantaneous because what's going on behind the scenes is that Alpha is looking at the values of these fields, and if they change, we will automatically change the field here, which is cool because the person doesn't even, you'll notice it was instantaneous because it's all happening on the local device here. Then behind the scenes, obviously, I would take unbound there, and I would, these two are not updatable because they're not bound to anything. But then in the bound field, then I would go in and I don't have it bound to any database, but you would tell what table and what field is. And a very important one to know is that if you want to store nulls, make sure you select this null of blank. Like, so if you want to have, if someone doesn't fill out that information for whatever reason. But that's how you would do it. You have your other fields, you have your bound field here, and then you have your calculated field expression that's going to happen. Now, alternative 2 is this, and this is perfectly legitimate, and this is if you get a little bit more comfortable. I'm going to go ahead and go to unbound 2. So first I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to delete this, so it's now no calculated fields. But now I can go into, and I'm going to create a button here, and I'm going to say calculate, okay? And I'm going to move this up 1 right here. So I now go into this button here, and I'm going to click text mode. So what I can do in here is I can go var unbound 1 is equal to, and this is all just JavaScript, and then I can insert a method which is called getValue, and then I can go in here and say get the value of unbound 1. So what this will do is take the value of unbound 1 and put it into a variable. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to change that. Now I'm going to say var unbound or bound 1 is equal to unbound 1 times unbound 2. Now, super secret is I go in here, I insert the method. Now notice what I'm clicking down here. It says insert UX, and we have a list of all the different client-side things you can do. So I'm going to look up something called set value. And then I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to set value of bound 1 to be the value of bound 1. And then I'll delete this other kind of stuff here. Okay, so I grab the value of unbound 1, undo, I do a little calculation, and I shove it in here. By the way, when I do a client-side calculation, guess what? Alpha is just doing all this for me. But if I have something more sophisticated where I'm doing something a little bit more fancy, it may be a situation where I want it there. So I'll go in here, go 1, 2, and calculate. 5, 2, there we go. Oh, not a number. So you have to do some error checking there. So that's all. So those are your 2 alternatives, especially if you want to do client-side. There's a third method where you can do what's called an Xbasic callback, sort of like what we were talking about earlier, where you can literally take the values of those 2 things, go back to the server, do a calculation, and come back. And that's really cool because you may want to go back to the server and do a database lookup, call a web service, or do something really fancy, and it's easy to do. But I'm not going to go into that because it's a little bit overkill from here. I would say if you can do it with client-side calculated field expression, get as far as you can with that because it's easy, it's simple, it's right there, it's built in, it's good to go. Once you run out of steam there, maybe look at using the some JavaScript there to do it. And last but not least is you could then use an AJAX callback to do something more sophisticated. But that AJAX callback will require you to have a a connection to the server. So if you're on like a mobile device, you may not be able to. If you're on a desktop web, you're probably golden. So hopefully that's helpful. Gives you some hints on how to do that.
Great.
Good.
And it spawned a couple more questions. One was, could you have your bound field, could that be a hidden field and have it still work?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I have noticed something though, and this is just a FYI. Sometimes I have found that if you hide a field, it does kind of screw up things. So let's go ahead. So what you can do is that I often, just to be safe, is instead of hiding the field itself, I go to container, I do a container, and I insert a container around it. And then what I do is I go down to the container and I say 1 equals 0, meaning false for show hide expression. So that effectively hides this, but there's something about the way that it's done that this still is kind of visible to all the code and everything else. I've just had these weird situations where I've hidden a field and all of a sudden my calculations won't work or I can't refer to it. But if I put it in a container, hide the container, this for some reason is marked available and then all my other calculations just work. It's kind of a little weird kind of gotcha. But and again, the user will not know the difference because these are essentially hidden already. They're just saying everything between here do not show. And so I find, it doesn't impact the performance or speed or anything else there. But just a little hint to the more advanced people is that if you're having a problem for some reason, you're referring to a field that's hidden and your calculations aren't working, go ahead and unhide it, put it in a container, hide the container, and it should work fine.
Great. So before we were talking about OAuth, but actually the question had to do with Auth0, which is a JSON Web Token service. It's not something that I'm familiar with, but I'm going to go and do some research with. It looks like it might be a standard that we should document how we use Alpha. So thank you much for pointing that one out. Another question is, could you hide, okay, so based on the value of a control, could you show or hide a panel? Maybe move to another panel or something.
Ah, interesting. Let's go ahead and do this real quick. Let's go. I'm first going to put in a panel layout. Remember, if you're going to put in multiple panels, you have to have, or panel cards, you have to have it inside either a layout or there. So, okay. And let's put in some text here. Okay, so I have panel card 1 and panel card 2. And if we go in here and look at this, then you'll see this is panel card 1, this is panel card 2. So if I go to panel card 2, I don't know of any like show or hide here, but let's go ahead and go in and let me give this here, hide it. And then let me go, so what I'm doing here is I'm going into button, hide it. I've created my panel card. I want to hide panel card number 2. So in my action JavaScript, I do have something called panel actions. So I'm seeing if there's a pre-made action that will do something that I really want to do. So show hide panel header footer, scroll it, set it. Okay, so my guess is you have to put it in a doc and then hide it from there. So
suppose alternatively you could just have it go to a different panel, just set a different panel.
Oh yeah. I was thinking if you just wanted to hide that all, you could take you to a different panel where that doesn't show, which is probably much easier. It's kind of just structure what's shown and hide. So, but that's the benefit of within here. If I go to this button right here and go into my action JavaScript and type panel, all these nice panel actions are available. Setting them, getting them, most importantly is hiding panel docs and setting URL. Like if you can set up a panel card as an iframe and actually update that iframe with information. It's kind of cool. I've used that for like showing documents in it. And then you can also show and hide panel footer there. So I hope that's close enough to kind of give you some hints on how to attack that problem.
That's great, thank you. If we did not get to your question today, or that was not enough information, please send it.
Or if I was wrong.
And here's another question someone has asked: can we get a copy of the Xbasic that's used for the canAJAX event? So yeah, please send an email to guides, guides@alphasoftware.com, and be happy to get you that code example. And that looks like it for the questions for today. So Dion, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
That's something that people have been interested in looking at for quite a while. If you do have questions, please send them, like I said, to guides, guides@alphasoftware.com. Also, today's session was recorded, and you'll be able to find a copy of the recording at videos.alphasoftware.com. So until next week, thank you very much, and we hope to see you at a future webinar. Take care, and goodbye.